Welcome to Life Change Transformation Podcast number 3, episode number 3. Today we're going to talk a bit about resiliency and what that means. And as always, I'm here with Maeve Langford from the beautiful country of Ireland. And she's a transformational life coach, and she just has such knowledge, and I just love the way she thinks about these topics, and it's just amazing. I'm joining you from Alberta, Canada. I'm a police officer by trade, but have a book and an author and a bunch of other stuff on the go that we can talk about down the road. But today we're just going to talk about some resiliency and what that means and the stuff that we've been through ultimately, right? Because we have personal experience with this as well, right? There's knowledge and there's always that growth piece that we have. And I think resiliency is a big part of that because, resiliency is just that the definition is the ability to bounce back from a crisis, right? And I think it's taken a little bit literally, but ultimately that's kind of what it means.
Yes.
Right.
And I would say it's something that we all need to develop, because on this human side of our journey, there is always going to be challenge and adversity. It's just part of the process. So resiliency, sometimes those challenges come fast and heavy. Sometimes, maybe there are more gaps between them or they don't feel so severe, but they're going to be part of it, aren't they?
Correct. And I think resiliency has been a big buzzword. I think it's something that you see it kind of everywhere right now, right? That word resilience and resiliency. And if you're scrolling social media like I do every now and then, and I take a look and it's like, of course, I'm interested in it. So therefore I see more of it. But right, it seems like it's always out there. They're talking about resilience and building that resilience. And, my 25 years as a police officer, I've been through and involved in many different things.
Yes.
And, the instances that happen by themselves aren't necessarily, the things that really caused me a lot of problem in my life, right? Because it's truthfully, I didn't have I didn't know how to process a lot of that stuff, right? I went through my life as a police officer. I show up in people's worst moments every day, right? That's our job. When people call us, they don't call us because they're having a great time. They usually call us because something's happened, right? Or something bad has happened to them or their family. And, I was young. I was 21 years old. I was policing when I was 21 years old. Like, what does a 21-year-old guy know about being able to deal with that or understanding what that even means? And, there's a few things that went along and that kind of built up and built up and built up until I had my officer involved shooting. And I didn't understand what resilience really meant. And the definition, like I say, is the ability to bounce back to a crisis. But in my brain, I thought, well, if I want to get back to the person I was before this, how do I do that? What I've come to realize now, though, is I'm not the same person that I was prior to, because I can't be. Right. I've grown through that moment.
Yes.
Right. I've grown through that moment. And because sometimes we just think, well, I want to go back to that person. We live in the past a little bit and we stay there and we get stuck there. But that's not really building resilience. That's just wishing for something that hasn't happened, right? Trying to turn back time.
They are denying it. Exactly.
Right. And so that growth piece is really, really important. And understanding that that's being resilient because you can't just avoid a situation. You have to really work yourself through it. Right. And that is the resiliency piece of growing into someone new.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So Gary, you had a very intense experience with that officer involved shooting. So what would you say is, the evidence of the growth, and how have you changed as a result of that experience?
Yeah. I have realized, so in that moment, so I had that moment and I thought I was going to widow my wife. I thought I was going to leave my son behind, an orphan. He was young. He was 18 months old. And when I look back at that moment and I think, well, and I ended up breaking myself down. So I was so caught up, and if you were to talk to a doctor, I'm sure I would have some PTSD stuff around all of the things that accumulated to me to that point. When I had decided to do something different for my life. And we had talked about in episode 2 about the vision piece. And so understanding what I didn't want in my life. So that really, the next piece of that was working through some of that stuff. So my resiliency showed up in a way that I wasn't really expecting it. And what happened is that when I look back at the work I've done to grow through, because it wasn't overnight. It took me like years. It took me 5 years really to truthfully work myself to a point in my life where I could be really satisfied with who I had become.
Mm.
Right. And I didn't realize on the way through, like I was always trying to get back to the person I was. And I think now when I look at myself and I see myself and I consider what it means to be who I am and where I'm at in my life is I'm a father and I'm a husband, right? And then I don't see myself as the police officer anymore, so to speak. I still do the job, and I'm still proud to do that job. But truthfully, I'm more than that. I'm bigger. I'm more than that, and that's where that evidence has come from. That's that growth piece where I'm so much more than just a label or just a occupation, right? I consider myself to be a business owner and someone that can impact the world with my story. And I see myself as that author, as that person who has written a story in a book about my events and how that goes. And that growth could never have happened without the ability to have that resilience, right? To work through, because those trials and tribulations of life, right? And building that muscle of just always one step forward and really like never letting that. I didn't let stuff really drag me down. For the first few years after I was in a bad hole. But when I decided to do something different, when I decided to move through this intentionally, right?
Mm.
I started to see myself differently. I started to grow from that and realize that's how I build that resilience piece. And that's how I built the fact that really truthfully I could just show up differently because I was different.
Yes.
Right. I had
Yeah.
grown. I'd matured or grown. People call it maturing or aging or whatever you want to call it, gaining wisdom. You can put whatever you want on it, but its resilience is what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's coming up in me talking with you about it today, Gary, is that growth or that maturity, that wasn't inevitable. Everybody experiences adversity. Not everybody gets the growth and the maturity that moment provides or potentially provides.
True.
And you use the word intentional. You said, for a couple of years there, you were in a bad place. You were, a bit lost and stuck and maybe there was post-traumatic stress. And then something happened and you got intentional. So was there a moment or, was there a kind of feeling or something
Hmm.
that said enough and now I choose recovery or growth
Hmm.
or movement forward in some way?
Yeah, there was definitely a moment of where I was faced with essentially a fork in the road of a decision. I had to choose a path, right? My wife was fed up with the way I was behaving. My wife is a very strong person. I love her to death because she has the courage and the ability to stand there and call me on my crap, on my BS, right? She was, you know, I was making a lot of excuses. I was drinking a ton and I just wasn't home. I wasn't present. And so she was tired of that. She was tired of me not just, of just having 2 children essentially to look after,
Mhm.
our little one and in me, right? And she wasn't going to have that anymore. And so when she said to me, she said, I don't care what you do. You can do what you want. I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do this. I'm not living like this with you anymore. So you're welcome to come along and change and do something different, or you can stay where you're at. No big deal, but I just won't be here for it. And when she said that in that way, because like she was going to decide, she had decided already that she was going to live something differently anyway, right? She was going to go on with that without me, regardless. Like it didn't matter to her what I was going to do, which she wasn't looking to change me. She was just telling me what she was going to do. And so then I had to really decide, what did I want? So what would I have loved? What would I love in that moment? Essentially, is
Mhm.
what I asked myself. But I didn't ask myself that question. But that's what would I love to do? How can I do this? Right? What can I do here? And so I just knew that I didn't want to be the person that was disconnected and angry and never home and not showing up. Right? I didn't want to be that person.
Mm.
Right? So I decided to be someone different, and it was hard because I had no
Yeah.
idea. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had not a clue, zero, because I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. This is what I want, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And when I made that choice, when I really leaned into that, what happened was there's things came. So Colette said, here, read this 5 love language book,
Hmm.
right? And so that was my first step about understanding how to interact in a relationship in the appropriate way, in the way that she needed for me to be there. In essence, now starting my resiliency journey, because now I was starting to change as a person. I was starting to really grow from my experience, right? And it was just little steps like that. So I would start to do things around. So I'd ask her, well, what can I do around the home that would help you? Because that was one of her complaints. I wasn't doing stuff around the home. I'd cut the grass and shovel the snow, but that's a necessity in this country. And so
And that's not nothing. I've seen the snow
right.
you guys get. Yeah.
And so we can't not shovel the snow in the middle of winter because you never get out of your driveway. But
Yeah.
um but in essence, I started to do stuff more around the home. And so those are something I could do, and I could focus on that every day. And those little things led to more education, right? More books that showed up for me to read. Um, more ideas around how to use my mind and my mindset. And then I got really curious about mindset because as I was going through that, I was still working. I was still working at work, and I had gone through a promotion process a couple of times, and I had been not successful, and it really beat me up, and I kind of reacted poorly. But I decided to take a different approach to my promotion process, um, as I was learning how to change and grow and that kind of stuff, right? And lo and behold, by changing my mindset around certain things, understanding where I have what I have, because I was in a great place. I love my job, I love what I was doing. If I got promoted, wasn't a be all and end all, and it wasn't going to change my love for what I was doing. So really, I was in a really good place.
Mm.
When I realized that, it changed my outcome. I got promoted. Weird. And then I got really curious. Like, I was curious already, but that what really caught my attention.
Yeah.
And things at home got better. I'm like, that caught my attention. Right. And so I'm like, oh, I'm growing here. How do I do this faster, quicker, better? And I think that's that resilience piece that shows up in a way that's so strong, right? That you're like, oh, I'm growing from this, and it's really caught my attention. Well, now what can I do? What else can I do?
Yeah.
Right? Because
Wonderful.
life's still going to throw you curves, right? Life's going to throw stuff at you regardless. Even
Yes.
in much like our positions now, life still throws stuff at us, even when we least expect it, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is, so for anybody listening to us today, what would you say? Like, what is that starting point of just saying, I choose growth? Maybe that is the starting point. I choose to be different. I choose a different outcome. Is it as basic as that, to say, you know, I get to choose. I'm going to make, and I'm going to make an active choice here.
I think it's that. I think it's understanding, we talk about division on the last episode, episode 2.
Mm.
And I think if you couple that with this one, if you think about all the things you don't want in your life, and because you're building that idea of what you do want, well, now you have to lean into what you do want. And it's just
Yeah.
about really saying, I'm going to lean into this,
Yeah.
right? I'm going
Yeah.
to lean into this quite a bit, because this is what can I do here now? Because this is what I really want. So, and then what happens is once again, it didn't happen overnight for me. It happened over years, right? And I didn't get
Yeah.
myself into the position I was in overnight either. It happened over years as well,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where you are in your life. Like, you could be having an okay life. You could be living, yeah, I'm doing okay. And you could be content. We talked about long as discontents last week, or last
Mm.
episode, sorry. Right. And
Hmm.
so and when you talk about that, those things are still going to be there,
Yeah.
because life is always seeking greater expression through us anyway.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I just love what you were saying, that like you you started to look at your mindset, and as you shifted your mindset, your experiences changed. I work a lot with people in the workplace, and often look at, it's around career development and promotion, and I talk to them about mindset, and we can get very stuck. The responses, if people aren't used to these ideas, they can be like, but maybe you don't get my reality. This is the system is corrupt, or the system is unfair, or oftentimes I work with women and they feel it's stacked against them, and I get that, and I've had those feelings and I've been in those environments. What's different is that we can change the outcome without the conditions having to change first. and
Correct.
and and what you're describing in terms of, when I become more resilient, when I'm managing my mindset, when I'm doing the things that I can do, even within that, the same police force, the same company
Yeah,
within it,
nothing's changed. Yeah,
different result.
100%.
Different result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like your circumstances are going to be what they are,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, like I say, nothing changed for me. Like you say that very eloquently. It's true. I was still doing the same job. Everything was exactly the same work wise. I was still going to that same job, coming home from that same job. It's I just chose to come home differently. I chose to be different. Even at work, I showed up differently in work. I didn't realize once again, I talked about this before, and I've said it before, that I was incompetently competent. I did stuff that I didn't know what I was doing exactly until I got a chance. Now I can look back on it, of course, right? I can reflect on it,
Yes.
of course, right? But knowing okay, that makes sense. That's why that worked, because I did these things,
Yes.
even though I didn't really know what that meant, right?
Yeah.
And so, but if you can be intentional, but if you understand what it means and intentionally do it, well, how much faster can you get that life that you're loving,
Exactly.
right?
So to help anybody listening, if somebody here today, if you're in a situation where you'd love that promotion, or you'd love to change the relationship at home, when you look back on it now, Gary, what would you say to somebody so that they could be more intentional? Some of it was around how you were showing up, but how did you show up different? Can you give us some tangible examples?
Yeah, like ultimately when I went to work, um, I just showed up as in my brain. I'm like, well, I'm going to be the best partner I can be for the person I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to really take note of the fact that I'm doing the job I joined to do. Like when I look back on it, in that moment, I'm like, well, I joined when I was 20 to be this patrol officer, and I joined to be in uniform. And I joined to go and help the public and serve the public, and hopefully make the world a little bit safer for the people that are living there. And so I'm still doing that job. So it's exactly what I wanted in my life. This is exactly what I asked for.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm just going to show up as that partner, as be there for the person that I'm working with, be there for the squad mates that I'm surrounded by, right? And if by doing those little things, it changed people's perspective of me. It's just a slight change. It's not like it's a huge 180. I just literally it just did this. It's like, you just shifted it over a little bit. And then by being there and just being actively involved in people's conversations, listening to people, if I can, if they asked for guidance, I would hopefully give them something that would help them, right? Or steer them in a direction where they could find it, and just be there, and really. And I worked hard. At just, let's go out there, let's take calls, let's do what the sergeant's asking us to do, and let's just be that good person, right? Just be a good person in that way. And then things changed for me.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I was applying for the promotion piece, I wasn't tied to the result of getting promoted. Like I really wasn't attached to it in a way. I wanted it, thought I could be good at it. It's something that I wanted to progress my career in, right? I wanted to have that additional, it's a bunch of reasons, right? I wanted to be there to help people in the squad. I wanted to guide them, mentor them. I also did it for my pension piece, right? I get a pension bump because of it, right? But it wasn't the be all and end all. If I didn't get promoted, I was like, it's okay. I'm still doing exactly what I would love to do, what I joined to do many years ago. So truthfully, I'm in no different place. I'm just in different, this is just different, just a different rank. And I went through that process very relaxed. And I remember working with my partner. I remember him telling me, he goes like, I've never seen anybody go through the promotion process and be as relaxed as you are. I'm like, yeah, I'm just really happy and content where I'm at. And if I get it, great. If I don't, it's okay too. Right. And so those, just by showing up in that way and then coming home, I would come home and I would just intentionally be present. So when my son was watching TV or my son was doing something, I would intentionally sit down. If it's playing cards with him, playing Transformers or whatever he was into in that moment, I would intentionally
Mm-hmm.
do that stuff. I made sure that I was mindful of the dishes that were in the sink or the garbage can that needed to be taken out or whatever. I was just mindful with that. And I was just super intentional with that. And it took the edge off at home. I showed up for my wife in the way that she wanted through the five love language. Like, I understood what her love language was. I understood what that meant. So I just literally, by understanding it, I'm like, okay, well, she's acts of service. She wants me to do stuff around the home. That's what she needs to take to make her feel loved. Then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about giving gifts or like she's not that, right? She was more like, please do stuff around the home to help me
Get
out.
me
That's
out
what I
here.
want.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to show your love for me. And so
Yeah.
I was just really intentional about doing those little things every day as best I could. There's days I didn't do a great job at it. Don't get me wrong. I had fallen down a bunch, but that's okay. I just started again the next day. It wasn't,
Mhm.
I'm saying I didn't let it sit for too long. I didn't fall into that trap for too long. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all that you're saying around mindset, Gary, is just a huge part of resilience. And on perspective, I suppose is one of the words I'd add into that for listeners today, is like that we get to choose our perspective. I mean, we don't get to choose what happens, but we get to choose our perspective on it. And I had a challenging experience
Yes.
recently where, I had kind of public and overt criticism towards some of how I work and the tools and the strategies I share, and it hurt. It really hurt. And it caused a bit of confusion and kind of self-doubt and questioning. And then I was like, okay, so you want to, I really believe in being authentic. So I'm looking at the tools I work with, and I have my coach too. I'm authentic in that. And, I participate in that. And one of the things that somebody said was, in adversity, when you're taking flack, which was what it felt like to me, I was taking flack. And the perspective that she offered was that, you're on target when you're taking flack. And I thought, okay, well, that's a perspective that serves me here, because when I had done some of the inquiry, I realized, well, I'm happy with my approach. I know it works. I live it, I teach it, I feel very authentic and in integrity with it. The other people don't have to buy it. I've no issue with that. They don't have to believe it or anything else. But I feel okay that I'm putting out there what I know to be true. And if it works for you, great, and if it doesn't, no hard feelings. But for the people who feel the need to criticize it or whatever, I get to choose my response. And when I see it as, well, if you're drawing flack, it probably means, in some ways you're on the right track. And that served me, and I think that's a form of resilience.
100% it is. Like
Yeah.
I said, life's going to continue to throw you things that you're going to have
Yeah.
to navigate. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things you had to navigate. Right.
Exactly.
And I can
Exactly.
guarantee you, by you taking that information from whatever came from that thing, that article or whatever that was, by looking at it, you could have very easily went, oh yeah, maybe they're right. And then withdrawn and just sort of like, right. You could have gone the other way,
10 years ago, I would have
right?
shrank back from
Shrank
that.
back down, right? And you,
Absolutely.
right. But now what you've done, so that right there is resilience. It's growth because you've changed, right? You're
Correct.
like, no,
Yeah.
I'm confident in
Yeah.
what I've got here.
Yeah.
And you don't have to believe it. That's okay. But I
Exactly.
believe it.
Yeah.
And those that are with me, they believe it.
Yeah.
And so I'm good, right? Which is
Exactly.
right. I'm
Exactly.
good. And so
Yeah.
really, and that is so much. It's growth. It's resilient. It's exactly how resilience should be when you are confident and you have that ability to sit there and say, yeah, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you
Yeah.
build it. And that's that muscle. It's not something that you didn't do that overnight, right?
No,
You built
exactly.
it over time.
Yeah. 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 For sure. For sure. It does come over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And life just kind of has a way of testing us in that way. I think,
Mhm.
I think that I think it does that to show us how far we've come.
Yeah.
I
That's a
think
good way of looking
I
at it.
really do. I think it gives us those little tests along the way to show you, hey, look how far you've come. Look at what you've done, and look at where you are now.
Mm.
Anytime you start something new, or anytime you decide for something different, or if you have those moments where you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, it'll always, you when you start the journey, it's always a very slow moving journey. And we all want to do it fast because we're impatient as human beings, right? We want things done overnight, right? Well, if I do this, I want this to be done by tomorrow, and I want to be resilient, and I want to have this goal by Thursday,
Yeah.
right? Well, it doesn't work like that, but I mean, it just, and then life's going to throw little curveballs at you. It's going to give you little things to come along the way, and I think that's really important to understand that those tests are there just so that you can really reinforce your belief. For one, reinforce that you are on the right road,
Yeah.
right? And it shows you how your growth and how much you've learned can be applied, and you can really be confident in what you've done and where you're at, right? And I think that's really, really key.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I look at, after my shooting in '07, and my journey started in about 2010. um and from then until now, that's what, 13 years now it's been. And I'm coming to the end of my career. I get a chance to retire here soon, and there were always little curveballs along the way. There wasn't a smooth straight track. We talk about it very linear, very linearly, like we're talking about one step after the other, and it's like a very straight line in my mind, right? Even in my mind it is. When I look back at it, it's not a straight line. It's very curvy. It's like a river, right? It's doing a
Yeah.
lot of this. It's ups and downs. It's curves. Sometimes you're almost back to where you started sometimes, and sometimes you're back up, and then you have those moments, right, where and I think um as we continue to grow as people, as individuals, right? If you're listening here, um, you know, it's about that growth and that piece of it. Like we're going to be tested along the way, and it's okay to be tested along the way, and it's okay to understand that piece of it. And
Yeah.
if you've worked on your resilience and you're working on building that habit, because you're going to grow and be different, and that's okay. Don't, like, someone said to me, lizards grow back their tails, right? If you cut off a lizard's tail, it grows back to the normal, to what it was normally. But human beings, we can't just grow back limbs and can't grow back certain things. Like, we're not that way, right? We don't have that ability to regenerate, but we do have the ability to grow,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And evolve.
And actually, I love what you said. If we go back to the start of this episode, and you were talking about how, initially you wanted to go back to how things used to be. And oftentimes, I think when we have a big, life event or life experience, a challenge, we want to go back to how it was before that. But whether we're moving forward towards something that we love, or whether we have to kind of get through something that's challenging, it that, like, we're being called to grow all the time, and there's no other way. Like, if we're not growing, we're regressing. We're
Yes.
not going back to something that was healthy. We're actually deteriorating in some
Yep.
way.
Yep.
So I think actually, when on this theme of resilience, one of the kind of resilient perspectives we can have around the challenges is that they are how we grow as human beings.
Yes.
We know this. Like, when any of us here as parents, or even if you've observed kids, you know, babies learn to walk by falling down, and there's a lot of it, like a lot of falling down, until we learn to manage these 2 feet of ours. And riding a bike, there's a lot of getting that wrong before we get it right. And kids are great with that. They're like, back up at it, and
Yep.
show me. And anyone who's walked a toddler up and down a hallway, and your back is bent over and you're exhausted, and they're like, do it
Giving
again, do
her.
it
Yep.
again, do it again.
Yep.
And they know that. And somewhere along the way, between, I don't know, 7 and teenage dom, we just get scared, or
Hmm.
it gets a bit hammered out of us a bit, and we're getting embarrassed about mistakes, and we're
Mhm.
afraid to, to put ourselves out there in discomfort. But it's absolutely how we grow. So when those challenges come, and I mean, this doesn't come naturally to me all the time, and probably not to you either. But what I know is that when I can see it as a growth opportunity, and when I can say to myself, well, I don't have to like this, but I want everything it's come to teach me,
Mhm.
then that can support the kind of resilient approach to the challenge rather than being overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, for sure. Right on. So we're coming to the end here. Really, my final thought on resilience is this: is that it's a learned skill.
Yes, yes,
It's a practiced every day, um, and it's something that we have all of us have inside of us. We have the ability to be resilient,
yeah,
and it's just about making a decision to be resilient. how
yeah,
you know how we decide to do that, and really, truthfully, like there's a lot to it, but it really isn't. It's very simple in a way where it's just about, okay, I'm going to show up a little bit differently. I'm going to try to be a little bit different. I'm going to learn. And what you said there, I'm going to take whatever this growth opportunity has to teach me. And if you
yeah,
do that with that question in mind, I think you're going to really see some success. And yeah, we
yeah,
are on LinkedIn and Instagram. Maeve Langford is the Instagram handle for her, and Facebook, right? And LinkedIn.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Myself, it's Frontline Resiliency Project. That's everywhere across all platforms. We'll throw this on YouTube. We're going to throw it on Spotify, where you just put your podcast, or any other podcast place there. It goes out through all of them there. So, do you have any final things to say before we
yeah.
wrap up
I'm
episode
really
number
quickly, Gary.
three?
I,
Yeah,
I yeah, and it's great that you've put out our contact details there for everybody, because I really want to say that this is not something that we have to do on our own. I mean, whether it's getting information with a book, that's a great starting place for a lot of it. But to reach out, whether it's to a coach, a mentor, a counselor, a spouse, a friend, like it's very hard to see what is it, the way our coach puts it sometimes, that it's hard to see the picture when you're the one in the frame. So
mhm,
to just reach out, there's support out there, there's advice out there, and don't feel you have to do it on your own. I think one of the most resilient things we can have within us is a willingness to ask for help, and
absolutely,
knowing that the help is there.
for sure. And that's, like I say, Maeve is a great coach. If you're in the anywhere in the world, really, you can reach out anywhere in the world. By all means, reach out to her for that piece of it. And if you're looking to read a story on resilience, you're welcome to read my book. It's called A Call for Service. So,
Mm.
overcoming adversity through resilience. So that's what the book's all about. So, I really appreciate it today. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a great 35 or so minutes. Lots of tidbits there. Please interact with us. If you have any questions, please by all means send us some stuff through the podcast stuff, or via our social media stuff. We'd love to talk to you, and maybe we can answer some questions for you. And like I say, Maeve's that great coach. By all means, get out there and have a chat with her about that, what that looks like for you. So I appreciate y'all, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.